Hi, I'm Jeff Lowe, Chief Executive Officer of Asian Sky Group and Asian Sky Media. Here as part of our video presentations that we have for our year-end 2020 Asia Pacific Commercial Helicopter Fleet Report. I'm very happy to have one of our regular contributors that we kind of go to every year for his insights and his views on the market. I've got Jeremy Parkin from Parapex Media. As I said, Jeremy's been a regular contributor to us, and so we're very happy to have him again, taking a look at the rotary market for us. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Jeff. And just to introduce myself for those who didn't see the previous episodes, I run Parapex Media, which is a helicopter market intelligence company. We track turbine helicopters around the world, who owns them, operates them, leases them, who contracts them, and where they are and what they're used for. So by that, all that data, you can build up trends on who's buying what, who's selling what, which sectors are hot and which sectors are not.
Yeah.
And it's also underpinned by helihub.com, which is a global helicopter industry news website. And I actually started the world's first helicopter industry news website back in 1999.
Okay, yeah, no dates, 'cause people then know how old we are. Okay, Jeremy. So, so thank you very much. And the other reason for me to drawing on your insights is, again, obviously our report deals with specifically the Asia Pacific region, but certainly it's a global market. And so really I wanted also to get your feedback and insights on what's happening on a global stage. So if we kind of take a look back at 2020, if you had to summarize it, obviously it was a year under a pandemic, which is unprecedented. But if you look back at 2020, what would be your sort of high level comments before we dig down and go in maybe into specific missions and OEMs and so on?
Sure. I think from a high level, the medium and larger twins, the production lines haven't been affected that much because the order backlog is such that a quick blip of 1 year doesn't affect like a two to 3 year backlog.
Yeah. And OEMs were still delivering, no problem there. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think on the smaller end of the market, the single turbines and certainly the entry level ones like the 505 saw a reduction in output. And because the lower down the market you get, the more it's towards discretionary spend.
Right.
Whereas the upper part of the market is more longer term contracts and infrastructure type things, which can continue whether we have a pandemic or not. Right.
More essential services type of thing. So.
Yeah, whether that's sort of oil and gas, whether it's wind, law enforcement, EMS, that sort of thing.
Right. And if you had to look at 2020 also from, it is 12 months. Certainly, I guess when I look at the market, it certainly had its dip, but then it also managed to pull its socks up, if you will, sort of in the second half of the year and recover a good portion of the ground that it had lost maybe in the first half. Is that your impression?
Yeah, that's right. I think when we went through sort of March, April time and everything fell off a cliff, I think there was a lot of companies caught on the hop and not knowing how to respond, and they needed to sort of take a pause, take stock, replan, and then relaunch in, say, June, July time once they'd actually worked out how to move forward and keep their employees safe, keep their customers safe, and so on.
Yeah. So do you think what are your impressions as far as, you just commented that certainly from a delivery standpoint, a lot of that continued as usual. But how about new orders? Did that go through a cycle through the year, or again, depending on the OEM we're talking about, some of them, if you will, rode through the storm better than others?
I think that the comments I said just now apply to new orders pretty well. I mean, the larger end is going to carry on.
Right.
Yes, the infrastructure projects may take a pause because, government spending is going to be towards pandemic response rather than infrastructure projects right now. But the monies they have planned for future projects are still going to be there. I mean, it's the the corporate end and maybe even the private owner operator of a light turbine. That's the market hit, and that's where the reduction in orders is.
Right. Yeah, I think some of the data that I had seen, certainly, as you say, the heavy machines, if you will, S92s and 225s, they certainly didn't suffer that much through the last 12 months. Actually, they seem to have done fairly well, as you said. So,
I mean, from an operational point of view, absolutely. I don't think there's very many orders coming in at that end of the market. So I think from a production point of view, we may see more of a slowdown in, let's say, 2020, late 2022, 2023.
Right. And I guess judging by your comments then, sort of the Airbuses in Leonardo with the bigger equipment, they fared better than, as you say, maybe the Bells and others that are reliant more on the light twins and that sort of thing.
Yes, I think Leonardo has carried on through very well. I mean, Sikorsky haven't taken very few new orders for commercial 76s or 92s for a long time. I mean,
for a long time.
There are currently 36 S92s parked around the world. And if that end of the market picks up, then it's going to be the cheaper to operate, biggest lower capital value of those ones that are parked ahead of buying a new one. I mean, there is a new order in the National 119 service in Korea for a 92. And there's one or two 76s getting delivered, but a lot of those were actually old Bristow orders. Refreshed, shall we say?
You refreshed, yes, refreshed.
Yes. If you move over to Airbus, they have not taken a new order for a 175 in 2020, and they still haven't delivered the three search and rescue ones into China. So their production line for the 175 is actually quite slow, if not at a pause. And Leonardo are doing much better. So the 189, the competitor in the super medium space, has continued on deliveries, partly to the civilian market, but also strongly in the military market. So their production line is actually carrying on very, very well.
Right.
I think if just picking up that market to finish it off, Bell, I think they have a bit of an issue with the 525 in that it hasn't officially launched. They've been test flying it for some time. They had the unfortunate accident, and they've had to go through the how to certify fly-by-wire thing as well. And they're facing with launching it into a market that has got very few orders. Bell doesn't actually have a good history of that end the market. I mean, going back 30, 40 years to the 214 ST, they only ever built 100 of those, and 45 of them went to the Iraqi Air Force.
And as you said, I think
Bell does have a. It'll be very interesting to watch where Bell goes with the 525, because they're, as a company, they're very dependent on the Osprey.
Right. And again, I think as you're saying, that super medium category, it's really getting impacted because there's lots of other pre-owned options for you that can fill that space for you using a heavy helicopter, but you can do it even more cost effectively.
Yes, certainly in the utility market. I mean, we're seeing lots of sales of older 332s to Super Pumas. And I mean, all the ones which were in the oil industry are now being repurposed, whether it's for vertical replenishment with the US military, like Air Center helicopters are doing, or actually being bought for fire suppression and load lifting. I mean, just this week we've seen a sale of 4 332s, 1L and 3L L1s were sold for a combined US 2.75 million for four large helicopters.
Really?
And they're going to Coldstream in Canada. And that's not the first ones they've bought. They now have a fleet of 10.
Right.
And they're buying up very cheap aircraft, and they will get really good use out of those.
Yeah. Now, so I know you monitor the market globally. Are there any I guess, idiosyncrasies or any sort of different market trends that you see in the Asia Pacific region, or is it's pretty much we're marching to the same drummer as the rest of the world?
I think China continues to build their fleet, and there's no sense that will stop in the next few years. I mean, the Chinese market is currently taking 40% of the Bell 407 production line, and that will continue as far as I can see. I mean, there's agreements with Airbus, local production of the 135. That seems fairly slow to get off the ground. I'm not sure how far that's going. I mean, the 135 from Airbus point of view globally is actually slowing down. But in the Asia Pacific, certainly Australia growing a lot, New Zealand's growing a little. I think the smaller countries in terms of fleet size, sort of maybe 150 or less fleet size, are actually stabilizing, and there's certainly a move to older aircraft being retired as well.
Yeah, there's certainly a bit of that going on as well. I agree. We've certainly seen that in some of the report numbers. Yes. If we kind of look at it now, if you're game to do so, if we look at different kind of mission categories and maybe just see, maybe have some comments on that. I mean, obviously, oil and gas has always been one of the key determinants of the health of the rotary market. So where do you see the oil and gas market rate at the moment? I mean, oil is relatively stable, sort of speak, around $60, $65 a barrel. So that maybe is where it needs to be, and people can grow from there, kind of affair. I don't know. So.
Yes, I mean the oil market is, as you say, it depends on the price as well. When the price was up over 100, then the global market was looking at sort of the more obscure locations like Alaska and the Falkland Islands as new locations. But we're also in a position where countries, I mean, Denmark was a great example at the back end of 2020. Actually, as a nation, they decided that they would not issue any more production license or exploration licenses in Danish waters of the North Sea. So we're heading towards a point where getting oil out of the ground is actually less favourable from a environmentalist point of view. The push is obviously. But it's also it's moving towards the wind market, which is the picture behind me. So I mean, if you look at just the oil market, I would say it's fairly stable at the moment. But you've got all those S92s I mentioned parked. As the market moves and there's more demand for oil and gas helicopters, that's going to be picked up. And the older types that have done the lower end of that market, like the S76 and the Dauphin, are being retired off for parts quite rapidly.
Right. And I guess maybe while we're on the subject of oil and gas, I mean, there has certainly been, on the operator side, been some consolidation, if we might want to call it that. Certainly the Bristol era, and then recently CHC buying the Babcock oil and gas, if you will, portfolio. So I guess people have been moving their pieces on the checkerboard a little bit. So yeah, so it's certainly that there's some consolidation there, and I don't know whether that's completely finished yet. I mean, there are there's a few rumors around that there might be one more big one. But it's how the match of the two organisations coming together, how that fit works. I think with Babcock and CHC, there's quite a good geographical fit. I mean, they're both strong in the North Sea, but there's other operations around the world that they're involved in. And I think one of the particular drivers for that was the big UK search and rescue contract currently flown by Bristow, which is coming up for the tender documents. The first stages are being talked about right now, and Babcock and CHC on their own would not have fared
nearly as well as the merger of the two organisations bidding together.
Right.
But interestingly, actually, just picking up that contract, Airbus have come out with partnering with Draken, which is a US-based military training and contract company. I mean, here in the UK, that Draken bought the Cobham operation with all the Navy support jets.
Right.
So it'll be very interesting how that pans out, because that's a big contract. I mean, we're talking sort of 21, 22 helicopters currently, AW189s and S92s, and certainly the OEMs have got their part in it to play, because they will want to make sure that the existing ones retain their share, and no loss of face going forward. I mean, Airbus will want to push the 175, and there's other things coming into play there as well.
Right. Well, as you kind of mentioned when we were talking about Denmark, I mean, and certainly some of the traditional oil and gas guys, I mean, they are all talking about wind, though, and how that is strategically important to them. I guess our friends at Air and Sea Analytics recently came out with their report on the potential of that market, but it does represent, it's a different market which requires different equipment, right?
Yeah.
And so
you got the 145 in the picture behind me is taking over as sort of more favoured than the 135, which was the early stages. The 135 was the aircraft for that market, but we're moving towards the 145 and the 169 as the standards.
Right.
Certainly in the construction phase, you see the 139 is also being used.
Right.
But it's a market that's expanding. I mean, as you mentioned, that report sort of covers where it's expanding around the world and what the potential is. I mean, there's a big contract in Japan for helicopter operations that's going to happen, and a German operator is helping a Japanese operator with that.
Right.
But a very interesting statistic I heard recently was that although there's a push that helicopters are maybe not environmentally good, it's actually, if you compare a helicopter supporting a wind farm with a ship supporting a wind farm, a helicopter is much, much better from the environment point of view. Because it's point to point, it goes there, it does its stuff, it flies back again. Whereas the ship is chugging out smoke for a lot longer.
A lot longer. Yeah.
And so on. You get the picture.
Yeah. So what about EMS, if you will, air ambulance services? Where do you see that market at the moment? Here in Asia, it's let's just say the business model to support that service, particularly in a big market like China, is still being ironed out. I don't think we really have any successful EMS providers in China. We've got some big ones that have big fleets, but whether or not their model is working is another story. And certainly, I think pretty much everyone in the market knows, King Wing is certainly struggling at the moment. But how do you see that market globally and the opportunities there?
I think, as you said, there's still lots of opportunity in some markets. I mean, Japan is a very mature market from the EMS point of view compared to China. Western Europe is a very mature market. The US is. But there's countries, India, for example, which I can see a big network being built up there. It's just that the infrastructure that's needed in India to make it all work is actually more of the challenge. And there's
more to it than just a helicopter.
Absolutely. And various people have tried in India in the last 12 years without making that much progress.
Right.
Whereas when you look at the population numbers, and I guess similar for Indonesia would be another one. For the sheer population numbers, you'd expect a much more robust.
Robust. Robust was the same word that popped into my mind for a minute. So yeah, robust, exactly. So
yeah. So I mean, the likes of Kingwing that did a massive order for 109 Trekkers and 139s. I mean, I think at one time 24 of those aircraft were quietly parked up in Italy at the factory. Yeah. And they've just been gradually selling those off one by one because then they're not going into China as originally planned.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. And the ones that have been delivered are likewise not being operated at the moment, are in a stored state as well. So I think in the end, they didn't take the full delivery of the order. And as you said, the OEM is dealing with what he has to. The ones that weren't taken, but the ones that have been delivered, likewise, they're on the ground as well. So, that whole market out here in Asia, despite the maturity of some of the markets, as you say, with Japan, what you would think would be obvious cases, India, China, Indonesia, it's just, let's say the infrastructure to support effective EMS operations just doesn't exist. And that includes the regulators, that includes ground transportation and everything else. So,
and I think another part of that is the countries who have a wish to actually get to that point are now paused for 2, 3, 4, 5 years by the funding issues around the pandemic. All the money they could put into new infrastructure projects such as EMS have actually been prioritized towards keeping the population safe.
No, exactly. I mean, these are one of the long-term ramifications of COVID, in that there is an economic impact, as you say, as hospitals and providers have to reallocate their, if you will, their capital, their assets to deal with a pandemic at the moment, which tends to deplete the coffers or whatever extra expenditure or money they had to spend for future projects going forward. So challenging environment. So
I mean, Indonesia's just taken delivery of their police AW169s. I think they've got those in just ahead of the demand on the money for other things.
Right. Yeah. As far as the tourism and VIP sector, just decimated, if you will. I think probably, certainly from the report that we've put together, that was probably the segment or the mission that took the biggest hit from COVID. A lot of the operators have gone out of business because there is no business. And so it's been very tough times for the air tours, tourism, VIP operators, charter as well. So,
absolutely. I mean, lots of countries have come up with various rules to keep their people safe, and part of those rules is significantly reduced travel, particularly international travel.
Yeah,
I mean, right now here in the UK, we would have a £5,000 fine for travelling overseas.
Right.
That's just one example, and therefore the travel market is at a halt, and that then brings in all the tour market as well. I guess in the US it's slightly different. It being such a big country, there'll be internal tourists, shall I say, so people within the US traveling to the Grand Canyon, Vegas, and so on. But the likes of the tours that you have in Vietnam, for example, they would be significantly hit.
I was talking to the Blade India guys this morning, and they're saying, and it's there has been, strangely enough, some good that has come out of the pandemic, and if nothing else, it's certainly, I think, for the rotary sector, when it comes to essential services, it's just reemphasized the importance of that essential service. So that's good. And also they were saying, when it comes to air taxi, tourism, VIP, they have seen an actual uptick in interest as well, because now people, India notorious for ground transportation congestion, they're not prepared to sit in traffic for 5 hours. Again, they want to get where they have to go as quickly and efficiently as possible, but also as quickly and efficiently as possible, keeping in mind their health and safety as well. So it's got that element on top of it now. So.
And there's that push also comes from the companies that employ them as well.
Yeah.
So companies wanting their executives to fly corporate jets or helicopters more. Not just from the time point of view, but actually from the safety point of view. And I think that the model that Blade has in India and in the US is one that will carry on rolling out. And I think they have a really good plan there, and there'll be more competitors coming into that market trying to replicate what they do.
Yeah. So if we go back and talk, I know we talked a little bit about wind. Do you think there are any other new emerging markets that will, if you will, carve a space out in the overall rotary landscape, if you will?
I think there'll be more the charter market that we were just talking about. I think that is heading for an uptick,
right,
for those reasons. I mean, I don't. Corporate ownership of helicopters there's a environmentalist type approach to say we don't want to be seen owning a helicopter, so there could be shared ownership models coming in. I mean, we've seen that a little bit in the US, but not in other markets. I think that could certainly increase. But the charter market has a big uptick ahead of it, I think.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And so, as you said, uptick, you think. So again, just picking your brains and what you think we'll see this year and going forward. Most of the indications that I've read seems that, the market has recovered, and it's demonstrated itself to be the word that you read quite a lot is resilient, and that most if you will, industry players in this market seem to feel that 2021 will see it will be positive and steady growth through the year.
Yes, I mean, resilience is definitely the right word. I mean, I've actually been part of an online publication called Resilient Aviation that started up way back last year in March as an immediate response, and you can find that on LinkedIn, Resilient Aviation. But yes, I mean, there are many parts of our market which are surviving very, very well. There's some parts which have seen noticeable changes. I mean, it would actually surprise me when the Gamma 2020 numbers came out that Robinson with the R66 continued producing at exactly the same rate as 2019, but Bell with the 505 halved from 2019 to 2020. And actually, Robinson produced more R66s than Bell produced 505s, which I guess Bell probably doesn't want to be reminded of. But I think one of the other things...
well, we just did, okay? We just did, okay? We're blacklisted now, by the way. We're blacklisted, okay?
One of the other things, and you'll know this from the corporate jet market, particularly, is the move towards sustainable aviation fuel as well.
Sure.
I think there's that's going to roll out, and we're fast going to reach a point where if you're not using sustainable aviation fuel, then I'm sorry, we can't use you. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's still very early days. I mean, only this week Bell was the first manufacturer to come out and say we're using SAF for our training fleet and our demo fleet. That's really the first announcement of SAF in the helicopter market. I mean, there's one or two very, very small references up until now. In the corporate jet market, that's rolling out quite well.
Sure.
Even though the charter price probably goes up 10-15% as a result, because the SAF price is quite high. The more people that use it, the price will come down. And that's where we're heading. So I think that's something to certainly look ahead to.
Okay. All right. Any other milestones or red flags you think you'll see we need to look for coming years?
I mean, I said before with you maybe this time last year. I mean, Sikorsky don't have plans for any new civilian aircraft. I thought it's quite feasible that they will become a military only OEM.
Yep.
And Bell is becoming more dependent on their military side. I mean, they've got good products, and the 429 is their most successful light twin for about 40 years, and I think by this time next year they will have produced more 429s than the combined production of treble twos, 230s, and 430s put together.
Right. Okay.
And 427s included in that as well.
Right.
So I think Airbus and Leonardo are probably in the best position overall. It depends on the balance they've got within the markets. Airbus is a little more exposed at the lighter ends of the market, which is the more volatile part from a orders point of view at the moment. But then I think both of them are in a really good position. Look, Bell is not in a good position, but I think their product mix, they're geared more towards that 525 issue that I mentioned.
Sure.
And it'll be interesting to see. And that's a massive investment they've made.
Yeah.
And when they launched that, we were in the early days of leasing companies. We were in the oil market going hand over fist, more and more aircraft. I mean, Sikorsky were delivering S-92s and the early days of the 175, and Bell said they wanted a chunk of the market. But I think they might have called it wrong. We'll see.
Yeah. And what about Leonardo's purchase of Kopter? What do you think about that?
I think it's in terms of the overall mix, it does give them entry into that market. I think it's less important on their radar right now. I don't think we're going to see any deliveries of new aircraft from Kopter for 3-4 years in any significant numbers. I mean, it looks to be a good product from the numbers I see on paper. And they have quite a lot of interest. Although it's been interesting to see moving those from letters of intent into actual orders.
That's something entirely different. Yes. So.
So actually that's one thing we keep in on our Parapex Media database. We actually note future orders, future options, and future letters of intent, so you can actually gauge how serious the customer is.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, Jeremy, I thank you for making yourself available this morning, your time, to give us your insights and, if you will, gut feelings about the market and where it's going as well. It's always interesting to be able to sit down and pick your brain, if I can say it that way. But thank you very much. I appreciate all the time as always. Thanks.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Jeff.